Good morning and a very warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Innovation Fund 2024 RFMBO Hydrogen Auction Call Info Day. I'm really happy to welcome you all, and we are glad to organize this for you and to give you all the necessary information about this call. I'm Roman Dobrava. I'm the head of unit for the Innovation Fund at CINEA. I have a pleasure to accompany you throughout this day and moderate. This is our second auction on RFMBO hydrogen after the success of the first pilot auction that we launched last year. And we have prepared a busy agenda for you for today. We will start with the policy context to see how this hydrogen auction fits into the overall policy framework of the EU. Then we will move on through some of the implementation context, and then we will plunge directly into the call itself, into the conditions, requirements, and essential elements that you need to know to be well prepared to prepare and submit your application. We have slotted 2 spaces for Q&A, as you see in the agenda, where we will try to answer your questions live, but we will be also answering your questions online throughout the day. Please use the Slido for that. And we will do our best to answer all the questions that we receive today. A small disclaimer before we start. There is a lot of material that has been published about this call. We have these presentations that you will see today. The event will be recorded, so the presentations will be made available to you shortly after this event today. We have also materials that are published on the website, tutorials, guidance, Q&A, all that is made available for you. What is important to always have in mind is that the official call text that was published and a Q&A on the Funding and Tenders portal take precedent over any other material. How we will communicate, as this event is fully online, we have seen that there should be around 1,000 registered users today. That's great. And we will use Slido for communication with you. So please go to slido.com, enter the code #InnovationFund24 auction, and then you can put there your questions. Colleagues here in the room will be answering as we will speak. And as I said, we will take some of your questions also live during the Q&A parts of the program. I hope that is clear. And I would go now immediately to the program of the day, and I'm happy to pass the floor to Stefanie Hiesinger, who is the head of unit for low carbon solutions at DG Klima, and Stefanie will take us through the policy context for this call. Stefanie.
Thank you, Roman, and a warm welcome also from my side to this second info day on the auction, because it's the second round of the hydrogen auction that we actually launched last week. I also would like to encourage you very much to ask all your questions today, because this is really the opportunity for you today to get answers to the questions on this call and the requirements that you have to fulfill to, in the end, submit a successful bid in the auction. In terms of the policy context, let me reiterate that, of course, this auction inscribes itself very firmly into the climate neutrality target of the European Union, which is enshrined in the European climate law. And on the slide, you see actually where we are today and where we have to go come 2050. And the hydrogen strategy on which this hydrogen auction is serving is a key building block when it comes to decarbonizing the different sectors, in particular also transport, industry, and so on. So the hydrogen auction is an auction that takes place under the European Hydrogen Bank, but it is funded by the Innovation Fund, which is a fund with an approximate budget between 2020 and 2030 of around 40 billion euros, depending on the carbon price. But it is also one of the initiatives under the fund, next to the grants that we award and also in the hydrogen sector. But it is an auction ensuring that the selection takes place on price. Of course, the Innovation Fund as a whole aims to avoid greenhouse gas emission and boost our competitiveness. Next to projects on hydrogen, the fund itself through the general grants, and there will be an info day on the net zero call that we also launched together with the auction next week. But the general grants will support energy-intensive industries, renewable energy, energy storage, carbon capture and storage, and net zero mobility and buildings next to this auction. This is just a reminder that the auction or the budget of the auction is actually coming from the Innovation Fund. Not to dwell too long on the Innovation Fund, but just to show you where it situates itself in the funding landscape of the EU. So in terms of the technology, we find ourselves at a relatively high readiness level between TRL 6 and 9, but at a relatively low commercial readiness level. So this is really to ensure that projects come to the market, and that is the aim of the Innovation Fund as a whole, and in particular with this auction that covers the green premium between fossil and green hydrogen. The Innovation Fund has always supported urgent policy priorities, not least the Net Zero Industry Act with an increased clean tech manufacturing window. But there we come back to the auction because the Innovation Fund is supporting the domestic leg of the European Hydrogen Bank by financing this auction about which we are speaking today. And there are other policy priorities that the Innovation Fund is supporting, like the wind package, the Strategic Technologies for Europe platform, whereby all projects selected under the Innovation Fund that we cannot fund, but still all projects selected get the STEP seal and can then look for other sources of funding. And finally, also the Industrial Carbon Management Strategy that we published in February last year, and that is focusing on CCUS deployment that is also urgently needed in on our path to climate neutrality. Just a quick word on the European Hydrogen Bank. It's an initiative that the President of the Commission announced in the State of the Energy Union in 2022. And since then, it has developed a domestic leg, which is our auction, and then also an international leg concerning the imports to the EU. What we are mainly aiming at with this fixed premium auction under the Innovation Fund is to install more transparency and also coordination for the deployment of green hydrogen. So while it allows for a demand assessment, hydrogen flows, infrastructure needs, and hydrogen cost data becomes more widely available. And I think that's why we qualify actually the first auction that took place last year and where the results came out earlier this year as a success, is that for the first time, first of all, we got a better idea about the cost of green hydrogen or the green premium that is needed basically to deploy green hydrogen at a larger scale, and that we also saw a very continuous bid curve in the pilot auction. And well, that links me to the results. Just a quick reminder of this first pilot that we had. So we had a budget of 800 million euros plus a contribution from Germany under a scheme that we call Auction as a Service, whereby member states have the possibility to come forward with an additional budget to finance projects selected under the auction, but not funded from the Innovation Fund, which then can be funded by the national authorities under this scheme. We received 132 bids out of 17 different countries in the EEA, and only 13 projects failed admissibility and eligibility. As I said before, one of the success factors is really that also we had this continuous bid curve, so not a clustering of bids at a lower level and at a higher level and nothing in the middle, but really we saw that there's a broad landscape of projects underneath the ceiling price that we had set. As a result of the auction, we awarded 6 projects. We initially had selected 7 projects with the budget of 800 million euros, but only 6 projects signed the grant agreement in the end, and that covered 1.4 gigawatt of electrolyzer capacity. All this information is, of course, also available on our website, so if you want to dig deeper into the pilot auction and the results, the information is publicly available. So we consider that this pilot fulfilled its objectives. It was a bit of a testing ground for all of us, of course, but we saw that an auction is suitable for reducing the cost gap between renewable and fossil hydrogen. The lowest bid that we received, or the winning bid, actually was 48 euro cents per kilogram of renewable hydrogen. But as I said, it also allowed for price discovery, and then will also support the hydrogen market formation, of course, because the price information on the selected bids is now shared, and the bid curve that I already mentioned is also available in an anonymized form. This will lead to de-risking of projects with around 700 million euros in grant support now available to these 6 projects. And we also had positive feedback on the administrative burden that came with this auction, because well, we tried to simplify the application process, and also the results were quickly available. So stakeholders generally in our feedback sessions commented positively on the reduced administrative burden. Now, turning to this year's auction, well, since we are so positive about the results, we have increased the budget from 800 million to 1.2 billion. But we split the budget slightly into 2 topics: a general topic where there's no offtake restriction with an endowment of 1 billion euro, and then a maritime topic, so where the off-taker has to be in the maritime sector, with 200 million euros in this window. We have also been successful, I can say, with in our discussions with member states, who also start to find auction as a service attractive. And well, there are 3 member states who have come forward with an additional budget of up to 836 million euros, and that's Austria, Spain, and Lithuania. The auction has opened, as I said, last week, so on the 3rd of December, and the submission deadline is the submission deadline for the bids is the 20th of February of next year. So there's a bit of time to prepare the bids, but not too much, since we are still eager to get to the results swiftly, and then also have a relatively quick process until we sign the grant agreements and can then proceed with the projects. And with that, I hand over to Matthias Langemeyer, Head of Department in CINEA, for giving you more context for the implementation.
Yes, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Also from my side, a very warm welcome and good morning. Thank you, Stephanie, for providing us the policy context for this Innovation Fund auction call, and with this call also contributing, achieving our common goals and objectives for the European Green Deal. So it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of CINEA, the European Climate, Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency, and I'm happy to see so many of potential applicants joining us for today's Info Day. Let me introduce you briefly CINEA, the executive agency which was established by the European Commission to implement 7 EU-funded programs supporting the Green Deal, and to mention specifically here the Innovation Fund, but also the Horizon Europe Research Cluster 5 program, which is providing funds for research on issues linked to climate, energy, and transport. So it's important to have these programs in one agency. It contributes to a better coordination in the implementation, but very much also in feeding back the results to the policy level. CINEA, the European Climate, Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency, is one of the 6 Commission executive agencies and has a budget of over 65 billion euros for the period 21-27. CINEA currently manages more than 3,700 projects, and we expect the overall portfolio to grow even further, up to 4,000 projects across 7 Commission's program by 27. CINEA is thereby the focal point for green infrastructure projects. We and the colleagues are providing EU funding and green advisory service to projects. We engage with beneficiaries and stakeholders and raise visibility of program results. So we provide feedback to the Commission services on projects and program implementation results. In the framework of the Innovation Fund, CINEA has already successfully implemented 8 calls for proposals, including the last year's hydrogen auction pilot, granting in total over 12 billion euros, and this figure covers also the 85 projects currently under the GAP preparation from the last Innovation Fund 23 general call. Innovation Fund calls have attracted more than 1,500 applications from all European countries, and CINEA is currently managing a portfolio of 123 highly innovative projects, and you will have to add then the 85 projects which are under GAP, under grant preparation. The Innovation Fund project portfolio is very diverse, covers almost all countries of the European Economic Area and most of the eligible sectors under the ETS directive, from renewable energy through energy-intensive industries, carbon capture and storage, energy storage, to maritime aviation and road transport. Let me share some data related to the Innovation Fund hydrogen portfolio. We have 40 hydrogen and hydrogen-related ongoing projects implemented in 14 European countries for almost 3 billion euros grant committed. As you can see from the slide, the Innovation Fund finance projects related to hydrogen across different sectors: biofuels, biorefineries, chemicals, refineries, manufacturing of electrolyzers and electrolyzers components. Concerning the production of renewable hydrogen, the project financed by the Innovation Fund expect to produce a total of roughly 570,000 tons per year of RFNBO hydrogen. This figure includes exclusively the projects having hydrogen as principal product. 6 of these are RFNBO hydrogen production projects financed under the last year's pilot call auction with around 700 million euro Innovation Fund grant committed. These projects are expected to produce a total of roughly 1.52 million tons of renewable hydrogen in 10 years of operations, avoiding more than 11.5 million tons of CO2 equivalent emission. As already mentioned Last week, we published the 3 new calls. The 2.4 billion euro Innovation Fund 24 Net Zero Technology Call for proposals, for which we will organize Info Day on the 17th of December. The 1 billion euro Innovation Fund 24 Battery Call, for which we will organize Info Day on the 18th of December. And the 1.2 billion euro Innovation Fund Auction Call, for which we are meeting here today. Throughout the day, DG Klima and CINEA colleagues will explain more in detail the auction call and its conditions. What I can say is that the success of last year's auction pilot with 132 proposals submitted, the current auction mobilizes 400 million euros more, brings in streamlined award criteria, more clarity to applicants, and a dedicated topic for the maritime transport. Complementing the presentations that you will see today, CINEA has also prepared 2 videos for applicants and information which is publicly available in CINEA, on the CINEA website. This aspect will be presented by my colleagues later on. Further, CINEA will provide support to the applicants while the call is open through FAQs and online help desk, and will manage the evaluation and of the submitted proposals. CINEA will then accompany the successful applicants from the preparation of grant agreement to the downstream monitoring of the signed grant agreement. I'm very optimistic, and I trust that the auction call will attract at least as many interest as for the last auction. This time, with a higher budget, the opportunities are even greater, and we are optimistic that this will attract many strong and competitive bids. I wish you success with your proposals and look forward to enlarging the family of Innovation Fund beneficiaries with many among you. I'm now happy to hand over the floor to Joanna Schiele from DG Klima, who will bring more insights into the 24 call. It's Javier, I'm sorry. Javier, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. Thank you, Stephanie, for the introductions. So welcome, everyone, and thank you for being in this meeting today with us, in which we will be presenting an overview of the new Innovation Fund auction that we have just launched the last 3rd of December. We've been working in this during the last year after the launch of the pilot auction of Innovation Fund 2023. As was just mentioned, as many of you would know, during this spring, between April and June 2024, we will consulting and presenting the terms and conditions that we were intending to present that were discussed on the 12th of June with main stakeholders. And based on that, we inserted as final terms and conditions that were published on September. Now, last week, on the 3rd of December, we finally opened and launched the auctions for applications. For those that read the terms and conditions, please note that small changes were made from the final terms and conditions to the open call text, particularly in Annex 2, some of the requirements that we are requesting on aspects on resilience, on the off-takers, and also on the unconnected infrastructure. And the idea is to have this auction open until the 20th of February for your bids to be received. The results, well, the bids will be evaluated by CINEA, and then the results will be published in spring. The overall view of the auction that we have just opened will keep a general line similar to the one that we opened last year. The main objective that we are pursuing under this auction is still to support the production of renewable fuel of non-biological origin hydrogen, RFNBO hydrogen, as it is defined in the Renewable Energy Directive and its delegated acts. Besides that, we have a new objective compared with last year. Now we are looking to support projects that contribute to achieving security of essential goods, wood supply, and Europe's industrial leadership and competitiveness. This is what we refer as resilience criteria. Again, as last year, we will be providing a fixed premium payment, and that is the fixed premium price that bidders will be competing for. The auction will be organized in a single stage, pay as bid, and bidders will be will be free to decide on their most appropriate bidding strategy. That means that within the bid price, they will be able to insert other costs like infrastructure cost or any cost they consider suitable. The auction will be again organized. Well, the bids will be first evaluated on a series of pass-fail qualification criteria and then ranked only based on price. The whole idea, as you can see in the graphs, is that bidders will be bidding for that fixed premium support that is intended to cover the gap between the cost of production and the willingness to pay from the demand. What are the main differences between last year's pilot auction and this auction? And most of these changes that we've made are based on the lessons learned and the feedback from the stakeholders that we had during the summer. The first change has been a considerable increase in budget. We've gone from the 800 million from last year to 1.2 billion this year. On top of that, this year we have 3 countries that are participating in the auctions as a service. We will speak about this in later slides, and that will be contributing with additional up to 836 million. Actually, these 3 countries are Austria, Spain, and Lithuania. This year, the budget has been divided into topics. There's a general topic with a budget of 1 billion, in which there will be no off-taker restrictions, the same as last year. But this year, we have a maritime dedicated topic with a budget of 200 million. In this case, this topic will be directed to producers of hydrogen that are supplying their production to the maritime sector. This year, after our experience, we are comfortable to have increased the maturity requirements for projects applying into the auction, and that will translate in increased levels of an increased amount of completion guarantee and also a mandatory time to reach financial close. We have also lowered the ceiling price. And finally, this year we have the resilience criteria that I was mentioning before. There is a key objective for this auction to support achieving security of supply of essential goods, and that contribution to Europe's industrial leadership and competitiveness, and that is reflected, of course, in the qualification criteria and requirements that are made to applicants during implementation. Here I'm going to give you an overview of the general criteria that we have, eligibility conditions that we have for the applicants. Like last year, we will be supporting producers of RFNBO hydrogen located in the European Economic Area. We will not be accepting virtual production. We have defined a minimum installed capacity of 5 megawatts electric, like last year, and that capacity has to be new capacity located in a single location, and we will not be accepting virtual capacity pooling. Again, projects will have to comply with that resilience criteria that we translate that projects will have to limit the sourcing of electrolyzer stacks with surface treatment, sealed unit production, or stack assembly carried out in China to no more than 25% of the total electrolyzer capacity as expressed in the bid. My colleagues will elaborate on this aspect afterwards. Off-takers, as I mentioned, there will be no restriction on the general topic, but there will be a minimum supply that has to be made for the maritime sector in the maritime topic. The bid ceiling price has been reduced from the 4.5 euro per kilogram from last year to 4 euro per kilogram of RFNBO hydrogen this year, and the support will be provided again for a maximum period of time of 10 years. There will be a maximum grant amount that can be requested in each of the topics, 250 million in the general topic, a quarter of the total budget available, and 200 million in the maritime topic. As I mentioned, we have increased the maturity requirements this year. That has translated in these requirements that you can see on screen. The financial close now has to be reached within 2.5 years after signing the grant agreement, and projects, again, like last year, will have to reach entry into operation within 5 years. These 2 milestones will be linked to the existence of a completion guarantee that will be called if a project do not comply with those requirements. The amount of the completion guarantee has been increased from the 4% from last year to 8% of the total requested grant amount this year. The payments, as last year, will not be made before, there will not be payments before entering into operation, and will only be made on a biannual basis upon presentation of certified and verified production of RFNBO hydrogen. We will only be paying for RFNBO hydrogen production for a maximum period of 10 years. There will be a series of requirements during implementation. For example, we will be required a minimum production levels, so a project will not be able to produce less than 30% during the 30% of the plant production, as it was stated in the bid, for more than 3 rolling consecutive years. And for each payment, we will not be paying more than 140% of the total volume that was originally planned. Also, at the end of the implementation, we understand that projects may be able to or may be producing RFNBO and non-RFNBO hydrogen, even if we only support RFNBO hydrogen. But by the end of the implementation period, projects will have to certify that they have respected 70% of GHG savings emissions in the overall production of the electrolyzer capacity that they have bid it with. That means that includes RFNBO and non-RFNBO production. There will be a series of limitations on cumulation with other public funding that we will elaborate afterwards. This is the same as last year. And this year, as it's very obvious, we have a dedicated topic for the maritime sector, as I was mentioning. The origin of having this maritime topic stems from the revised ETS directive during 2023, from which the Innovation Fund is directed to implement the revenues from 20 million allowances to be deployed to support the decarbonization activities in the maritime sector, and that translate also into dedicated topics. And that's why we're doing this dedicated topic this time. For projects participating in this maritime topic, there is a specific eligibility condition, which is that they have to engage with off-takers belonging to the maritime sector, and they have to supply at least 60% of their total volume of RFNBO hydrogen during implementation to that sector. That requirement will not be only checked at the evaluation moment, but also during the implementation. And what do we understand by an off-taker in the maritime sector? Well, we understand it as any entity that will use the hydrogen or the hydrogen derivative, in case that we speak of an integrated project, produced by the derivative produced by the project to carry out or making use of bunkering activities in ports within the European Economic Area. We are not accepting fuel traders or intermediaries or storage facilities as maritime off-takers due to traceability challenges. The documentation that will have to be presented by participants in the maritime topic as part of the off-taker strategy, which is described in Annex 2 of the call text, will be the following. They will have to present, together with the off-taker strategy, a self-declaration from the off-taker itself, stating that indeed it belongs to the maritime sector, and then it will have to be accompanied by justification and proven information. Basically, if we are speaking of a shipping company, we will be requesting information such as the maritime operating holding account from the ETS registry, the number, the name of the owner of that account, the IMO unique number company from the ships, or in case that we're speaking of bareboat charters, a proof of a maritime chartering agreement. In the case that we are speaking of an off-taker that is providing bunkering activities, and that includes fuel supply and the operation of bunkering activities within the port, we will require the endorsement letter from a maritime authority, from industrial association like the Bunkering Association, from a port authority like the Port of Rotterdam, or the valid statement of a third-party auditor, confirming that indeed that off-taker can be regarded as a provider of bunkering activities within a port of the EEA. And with this, I give my word to my colleague Evelina Daniel, who will present to you this new resilience requirement that I was mentioning previously.
Thank you, Javier. And yes, very happy to present the resilience requirements. It was already mentioned, they are new. We haven't had such requirements in the pilot auction that we held last year. Now, why do we have them? This goes together with general policy objectives of the EU, to have open strategic autonomy, also to have economic security. This notion you can find notably in the mission letters to the new commissioners. So yes, in line with these overarching objectives, we also have resilience requirements in our 2024 auction. Now, those resilience requirements, you can note the plural here. They are composed of several elements. You have the bird's view on this slide. So we have 4 elements here, plus obviously how we will be checking that both at the bidding stage and also during the monitoring period. So the very first element, it is the qualification criterion, which is called achieving security of supply of essential goods and contribution to Europe's industrial leadership and competitiveness. So here we will be looking how the project contributes to the diversified supply chain, and especially whether it may contribute, or it will rather avoid, building dependency on a single third country, which may threaten the security of supply of electrolyzers in Europe. Then the second element, it will be compliance with the standards. And here we have the ISO standard 22734, the version from 2019. If there is a newer version available at the moment of the entry into operation, of course, we will take the newer version of the standard. The work is actually already ongoing in the ISO forum. And then there is also cybersecurity, and a cybersecurity plan will have to be presented at the entry into operation. The third element, it's increased information requirement. So you will recall already from the pilot auction, we had the electrolyzer procurement strategy, which is quite extensive documentation, which was already assessed during the pilot auction, and where already in the pilot auction we were asking notably about the origin of the electrolyzer. Now additional questions are asked so that we can carefully monitor the market developments and intentions of the bidders. And then the last element, the risk of investigations. Here actually we don't create anything new. We just remind the bidders of the existing legislation. First of all, there is the foreign subsidy regulation, and then we have also trade defense instruments. Like I mentioned, compliance will be checked at the moment of the bidding, and it will be monitored during the operation of the project. So that was the bird's eye view over the resilience requirements, and now a bit of a deep dive into each of them. So first, probably the most important one, the most in the spotlight, I would say, is indeed this qualification criterion about the security of supply and contribution to Europe's industrial leadership and competitiveness. Why we have such requirement? Because we want to align with the same objectives as are put in the Net Zero Industry Act. So we don't want to build dependency on a single third country on net zero technology. Here, of course, we talk about electrolyzers, and analysis of the Commission is that there is a significant risk of increased and irreversible dependency of the EU on the imports of electrolyzers from this one country, which is China. So based on this analysis and identification of this risk, we have under the qualification criteria, under the relevance criterion, we have a new sub-criterion assessed in a manner of pass-fail, to keep it simple. And here, under the sub-criterion, we are asking that projects limit the sourcing of electrolyzer stacks with surface treatment or cell unit production or stack assembly carried out in China to no more than 25%, expressed in megawatts, because we talk about electrolyzer stacks, of the total capacity of the bid. Now, let me untangle this a little bit. So, yes, they can be stacks with those characteristics carried out in China, then can be sourced, but they cannot represent, they can be sourced from China, but they cannot be more than 25% of the total electrolyzer capacity. Now, you see that we focus on the 3 activities. One is surface treatment, second is unit production, and the third one is stack assembly. If any of those activities takes place in China for more than 25% of the electrolyzer capacity, then a bid with such electrolyzer sourcing will not be able to pass this criterion. If those stacks are less than 25%, this is still fine. The bid will pass this qualification criterion. Very important, if it is other third country than China, then this sourcing can be 100% even. It is not a problem at all. So this criterion is only looking whether the electrolyzer stacks are sourced from China up to 25%. Fine. Above 25%, no, the project will not pass this criterion. And I would also like to draw your attention to maybe very subtle wording issues. They are very well explained in the call text, as those of you who already looked might have seen. So we talk about cell production and stack assembly. Those 2 words are even underlined here. Stack assembly, to put it in a very layman language, putting the stacks together, the workmanship involved in that. Whereas cell unit production, here we talk where actually the electrodes and, depending on the technology of the electrolyzer, diaphragm, membrane, or solid electrolyte were produced. So there is a difference between assembly, mere fact of putting it together, and the actual production that we care about in terms of the cell unit production. Now, there needs to be evidence to underpin this claim, so there will be a self-declaration in the application form, and then we also want to see a reflection of this, what we call the China clause, if you like, in the memorandum of understanding, letter of intent, or other form of the pre-contractual arrangement between the bidder and the OEM, original equipment manufacturer of the electrolyzer. So in this MOU, LOI, other pre-contractual document, we need to see the clause that the electrolyzer stacks, which will be provided to the bidder, will be in compliance with this rule. So this is something that will be checked during the application process. Now, moving on to ISO standards and cybersecurity. So in terms of standards, we have chosen one very well-defined ISO standard. You have the numbers here. Like I already mentioned, if there is newer version available, of course, we will refer to the newer version. It relates to hydrogen generators using water electrolysis, so exactly the equipment needed for our projects. Concerns industrial, but also commercial residential applications. This is less relevant for us, but industrial, yes. So yes, we want that projects, when they enter into operation, they comply with this ISO standard. This standard is not yet mandatory one under EU legislation. It is still a choice of a project to apply to that, but it confers the right level of security, safety, and in order to participate in the auction, in order to be awarded and then execute the projects, we make it mandatory in the auction. Cybersecurity plan, that also merits going a little bit more in detail. Again, at the entry into operation, we will ask the projects to outline how they will ensure the cybersecurity of the installation. And here we care that operational control of the installation remains within an entity which is established in the EEA, and that the data is stored in the EEA. So, I mean, putting that really into the bullet points, operator is in the EEA, or we can put it also with a negative example, electrolyzer cannot be remotely controlled from outside EEA. That would be a danger to cybersecurity. And then there is the data requirement. Again, there is a location in the EEA, which is important. Of course, there are multiple possibilities to store the data. It can be at the company or project premises. very good, then probably there is no issue at all. The project has to be in the EEA, so therefore the computer will be in the EEA and data will be in the EEA. But okay, we also live in the modern age, so very likely that actually data will be on the cloud. And then we are caring where the data servers are placed, and we are asking that they are in the EEA. Here a bit going into technical data details of the servers. We also care where the server redundancies are located. We know that this is the standard practice for all the data servers to have redundancies, and we care that they are also put in the EEA. Now, concretely, when the project is bidding in the auction, this can only be the self-declaration that the projects will comply with those requirements. There is no data yet generated. There are no operators yet in place. So we ask for the intention to comply with those requirements. But when the project enters into operation, then we want to see a cybersecurity plan which outlines exactly how it works in practice. And now I'm moving on to the third element, which is more of the data gathering nature, which should not be a surprise because already in the pilot auction we had this electrolyzer procurement strategy. And thanks to this strategy and the information gathered from the bidders, we were able to produce so many in-depth analytics, which were actually found useful by many stakeholders. So many of those elements were already there. Now some items are additional because we want to have even more complete overview. I stress that this information is not assessed. No points are given on this. We are ranking the bids only on the price. This is purely for informational purposes. If some part of this, if some of those questions are not applicable, it is fine to say not applicable or explain why not applicable. So we will be asking about the origin of the equipment. Here there is a difference between our requirements in terms of sourcing from China and the general origin of the equipment. Origin of the equipment, it means that if electrolyzer was produced in Europe, in EEA, we will say it is of the European origin. Correction, it is about electrolyzer stacks, so were they produced in EU country, EEA country, or if they were imported to Europe, then we will be caring about the last country where substantial transformation took place. So in the imports bill, if the stacks are imported, say, from India, it would be put that the country of origin is India. So we are just caring about this last country where the important transformation took place, as is the standard practice for the customs purposes. We will be also asking about critical raw materials intensity. So here we want to know, I mean, it's an estimation, doesn't have to be backed by the full study, percentage of the value of electrolyzer stacks that can be allocated to those critical raw materials. I stress estimation. This information should be available from the supplier of the electrolyzer stacks. We are asking whether actually the OEM has a recycling strategy, end-of-life strategy for the stacks. Of course, now we are all caring that those electrolyzers happen, but at some point there will be also an issue what will happen once the equipment comes to the end of the lifetime. We ask whether there are some additional standards that the equipment comply with, and whether the supplier, again it is about the manufacturer, whether they have signed up to the responsible business conduct. And there is one question which actually ties up with my next slide, which is about the fourth element of the resilience. The question whether the manufacturer, if it is established in Europe, has received foreign financial contribution over the past 3 years. This information will be important for us to look if there are any issues that could be highlighted, which could be flagged up under the foreign subsidy regulation, because now the European Union has a possibility to investigate the players which are established operators, which are established in Europe, which receive also foreign financial contributions, which might be actually the subsidies. So just like we are monitoring and investigating the state aid, and we are making sure that the state aid is not distorting the internal market, this is the core competence of the DG Competition, we are also looking whether the foreign financial contributions are not subsidies that are distorting the internal market. So we are asking about this information, whether the producer of electrolyzer has received such financial contribution. We look at the reasonable period of the last 3 years. This should be information which is easily available from the supplier of the electrolyzer. If you, as a bidder, receive the information that this information is not available, we would like that it is explained. It is now part of standard practices also under the EU, under the national public procurement, to ask this question, so operators are increasingly used to this question. So that takes me very neatly to exactly the existing legislation, which is foreign subsidy regulation and trade defense instruments. Again, nothing new, specifically designed for this auction. We just remind you of the existing instruments in the EU. And yes, notably under the foreign subsidies regulation, there is a possibility that if we see, by the way, both in the national auctions and also in this European auction, if we can see that there is a bidder that bids very, very low, much lower than all the others, and if this bidder also answers the question that indeed it will purchase the equipment from the supplier which receives a foreign financial contribution, it doesn't mean that immediately this bidder is disqualified, but it means that it will be carefully evaluated, and if need be, an investigation can be launched. There are several steps in this investigation. It needs to be seen if this financial contribution is indeed of the distorting nature, how big it is, and so on. So there is quite a way before something happens. And of course, we only care about the public financial contributions because this is as close as it gets to the European state aid. Now, trade defense instruments, we are here more in the practice of gathering the evidence, because trade defense instruments can be triggered when the entire sector is analyzed. So it is not because something happens in one auction that they get triggered. Actually, the evidence needs to be gathered consistently across the whole sectors. But we are an important element of the electrolyzer deployments. So if there is evidence of unfair trade practices, so that would concern purchasing electrolyzers from suppliers which are not established in the EU, they are established outside, and then there may perceive some subsidies. If we see this evidence, this is something which we will channel to our colleagues working in DigiTrade on those sectoral instruments. And then my last slide on the compliance. You see that this slide is quite detailed, also because we pulled actually together here also requirements concerning the maritime basket. So you have it all in the one slide. And obviously, the logic here is that if we are putting requirements, and if at the moment of the bidding we can only ask about the intention to comply, we need to check when the project starts to operate, when actually it already is past the final investment decision, whether those intentions are indeed fulfilled. So first moment to check is the financial close. This is, now Javier already explained that, this is the moment that we control also in terms of other aspects to see if the project is on a good way to be realized. So yes, because financial close means that all the contracts have to be signed, we are checking whether the contracts signed with the electrolyzer supplier, they respect our requirements in terms of sourcing. So in those contracts, we need to see the clause that the bidder is in compliance with the clause on limiting the sourcing of electrolyzer stacks from China. Then at the financial close, there is also need for the signed offtake agreements with offtakers belonging to the maritime sector. So this is indeed the moment when we can see that it really happens. Of course, this requirement is for the 60% of the planned volumes. Next step, entry into operation. And here the installation was already built, and it can be verified whether it is indeed compliant with the ISO standard, and the bidder can present the cybersecurity plan. It is also a moment that electrolyzer was produced, was delivered, so it is no longer declaration, it is no longer the contract. Now the producer of electrolyzer can make a self-declaration and can provide evidence that indeed this clause on limiting the sourcing from China is fulfilled. During implementation, of course, we want to know about changes in the offtake agreements, especially important for the projects which will be applying to the maritime basket. So that's just part of regular monitoring. And then end of the implementation, we are requesting the entire report confirming the compliance with all resilience criteria. So what was put on the previous slides. Then, of course, for the maritime sector, we want to see the third-party certification that 60% of the produced volumes were supplied to the maritime off-takers. And one more element, very useful to actually gather it here at this slide, end of the implementation will be also the moment for the certification that the entire hydrogen production of the installation is meeting the requirement of reduction of the greenhouse gases of at least 70%, as is put in the delegated acts of the Renewable Energy Directive, which come with the definition of RFNBO hydrogen. I stop here. I pass to my colleague Johanna.
Thanks very much. We're now going to continue with the accumulation rules of the auction. Oops, wrong direction. Here we go. So the accumulation rules have basically not changed compared to last year, which is good news. We're still going to run you through one more time, just as a reminder. So the general rule is that you cannot accumulate funding of the auction with other public funding for the same project. However, there are some limited exceptions. The basic logic behind this is that we want projects to compete on the best project economics and not based on the best national subsidy situation. So it's really about finding competitive projects and not finding projects that happen to be lucky to be in a region with a lot of other funding available. So there's 4 aspects of the projects that could be considered with regards to accumulation rules. The first one is the electrolyzer manufacturing, which is clearly not within project scope and which we're not funding through the auction. However, of course, the electrolyzer price is influencing your bid price. Here, there are basically no accumulation rules. The electrolyzer manufacturer can receive public funding. It doesn't matter. It's not relevant for the auction. If you buy a subsidized electrolyzer, that's not a problem. Then there's the renewable power installation, which may or may not be part of the project within project scope. And here we don't impose any additional rules beyond the rules in the delegated acts for RFNBO. So basically there are clauses on what makes renewable power additional. If your project comes into operation after 2028, the renewable power must not be subsidized, but those rules are set down in the Renewable Energy Directive and its delegated acts, and we're not imposing any additional rules on that in the auction. Now, the third bucket is the electrolyzer project itself. So that's the project you're bidding with in the auction. It's the blue section here. And here, in general, you cannot accumulate other public funding. So you cannot receive CAPEX or OPEX for the same project that you're bidding into the auction with. There are some very limited exceptions on power fees or grid and levy exemptions, for example, which I'm going to go through in the next slides. But the general rule is no CAPEX or OPEX aid for the bid that you put in. You have to decide if you want to receive other subsidies or subsidies through the hydrogen bank auction. And then lastly, there's the off-taker who's buying your hydrogen. And here the rule is fairly common sense. What we're trying to do is we're trying to avoid that the same hydrogen volumes are subsidized twice, once on the side of the producer and then again on the side of the consumer. So let's say you're selling your hydrogen to a steel plant, and that steel plant has capex costs because they need to implement a new type of furnace, and that obviously comes with costs. That is no problem. The off-taker can receive capex aid of any form because that doesn't influence the OPEX cost of purchasing the already subsidized hydrogen. However, the off-taker is not allowed to receive OPEX subsidies for the same hydrogen volumes that are already subsidized in the hydrogen bank auction. So let's say the steel plant is consuming, simple number, 100 tons per year. If they are buying 50 tons of already subsidized hydrogen from the hydrogen bank auction, so from a producer that is bidding into our auction, then they must not get OPEX subsidies for more than the other 50 tons that they're consuming. However, that is possible, so you can split the volumes, you can just not subsidize the same volumes twice. Now, let's go a little bit into the exceptions that I mentioned before on the electrolyzer project itself. So, first of all, very early stages of the project. So, for example, if you got a feasibility study or a FEED study subsidized at an earlier project stage, that is not a problem. We consider this as being very early stage and not part of the full project that you're bidding into our auction. So, having received subsidies for very early project stages is fine. Secondly, you can bid into the auction with a capacity expansion on an existing project. So if you already have a site with, say, a 50 megawatt electrolyzer, but you want to double that capacity to 100 megawatt, you can simply bid the additional 50 megawatt as a freestanding project into our auction. And if the other 50 megawatts that are already there have or will receive subsidies, that's not an issue. Third point is there are some reductions on levies on electricity consumption, which qualify as state aid. And here, if those levies were granted under section 403 of the SEAC, of the state aid rule, you're also allowed to accumulate those levy exemptions. Maybe a couple of points for clarity. Not all levy exemptions are state aid. If they're not state aid, there's no problem at all. There simply is no accumulation case. But if they are state aid, you need to check the state aid approval and see if they have been approved under point 403. And here also your national competent authority who's responsible for state aid in your country can help you identify this. We have also posted in our Q&A document the link to the state aid database where you can Google or search the levy exemption in question in your country and see if it's state aid or if it's not state aid. If it's not included in that database, it's likely not state aid. Then the last point, support for transport or storage infrastructure linked to your project. That is fine, provided that the infrastructure is not dedicated. What do we mean with not dedicated? That means it's open to other market players as well. So if your project is connected to a pipeline and the pipeline was subsidized, that's fine as long as the pipeline is open to other market players as well and is not a purely private pipeline from your production site to your consumer, not open to anyone else. What matters here is not if other players actually use that pipeline, but that it's in principle open to be used by other market players. Now, this is a bit of a manual or a guide on how you can check, especially the levy exemptions. Unfortunately, with 27 countries or 30 countries with the EEA and a lot of different state aid cases, we're not in a position to research all of those cases for you, so you have to do that work yourself or hire a consultant to do it. But we can give you advice on how to tackle the problem. So, first of all, you have to check, do I want to receive any other public support? That's the starting point on the left. If the answer is no, then it's fine, you have no accumulation issue in any case. If the answer is yes, then there's 3 questions that you should ask yourself. First is my public funding EU public funding or is it state aid? If it is state aid, so if it's national support, you have to check, is it a general measure or is it actually state aid? If it's a general measure, like most levy exemptions, it's not state aid and therefore there's no cumulation issue by definition. If it is state aid, which you can check in the state aid database that we link, you have to follow the cumulation rules that are outlined in the cumulation annex of the call text. And if you don't know if it's state aid or not, you have to reach out to your national competent authority that's handling state aid cases in your country to ask for clarification. Lastly, a question that comes up frequently is whether free allowances are a problem for accumulation. So since the last ETS revision, electrolyzers do receive free allowances under the ETS. This is a revenue stream for your project because you receive these free CO2 allowances. You don't produce carbon when you produce RFNBO, so therefore you don't have to use these allowances and you can sell them. The simple answer here is no. This is not state aid, it's not public funding, so there's no problem with selling your free allowances and using that as an extra revenue stream for your project. And then as a last point for our presentation from Klimaside, we want to quickly highlight the option of auctions as a service. It was already touched on earlier on, so I'm going to keep this fairly short. Basically, auctions as a service is an offer where we offer our auction design to member states to allocate additional national funds for national projects. So that means this money becomes state aid because it's national funding. In the Innovation Fund 2024 auction, 3 countries have decided to participate in auctions as a service. That means for bidders from Austria, an extra 400 million euros are available in this auction. For bidders from Spain, an extra 280 till 400 million euros are available from the Spanish government. And in Lithuania, an extra 36 million euros are available in Lithuanian state aid. We encourage other countries to participate next year. We think this is a great way to spend your national funds if you want to support hydrogen projects, but you don't want to reinvent the wheel and start a new national subsidy program from scratch if there's already a European one. What are the benefits for member states of doing that? Well, the biggest benefit is that we have designed our auction in close cooperation with DG Competition. That means the auction design is fully state aid compatible. We notify the scheme for the member states, so they have a very easy time with notifying their national measures, and the state aid clearance goes super fast because the auction is SEA compatible by design. So if that sounds interesting for you and you're in a country that doesn't have a national budget this year, go to your national government, convince them to do it next year. We'd be happy to take anyone on board. How will it work? This year, we get this question a lot as well. So no, we don't run an additional Spanish auction or an additional Austrian auction. We run a single auction. We rank all of the bids that we receive from the lowest to the highest bid. This is, of course, if they pass the yes-no qualification requirement. So these are all bids that are of a high quality that are ranked on price. We then clear the most competitive bids until the 1.2 billion from the Innovation Fund are exhausted. And after that, we shorten the supply curve by kicking everyone out who does not have a national funding window. So that means what will remain is Spain, Lithuania, and Austria. And then we clear those projects with the national funding made available again from cheapest to most expensive. We pass those projects on with the member state. And so, for example, if you're an Austrian project that did not get awarded under the Innovation Fund budget, but falls within the Austrian budget, we pass you on to the Austrian government. They negotiate the grant agreement with you, and they will pay you every 6 months based on the verified and certified volume, just as CINEA would if you were awarded under the European money. And with that, we're going to start with the deep dive on the application process and the more practical aspects of how to submit your bid, how to work in the funding and tenders portal, and all of the other details. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Johanna, Javier, and Evelina, for a lot of information. I trust that we still have our participants with us, and I ask your permission to give you a bit more before we go for the first Q&A session. This was very dense, but very important, and as I said before, the session will be recorded, so you can review this at your leisure later on repeat, because there is a lot that has been explained, and we will try not to, let's say, repeat the things that were already said. And really, now my objective is to quickly go through the critical elements that relate to application itself. It was already mentioned, this auction is divided in 2 topics. You need to select a topic in which you apply with your project. You can submit 2 different projects into 2 different topics that you can do. Nevertheless, you have to pick a topic for a single project under which you go. The difference between the 2 topics is that both relate to RFNBO hydrogen production capacity that must be new, at least 5 megawatt of installed capacity of the electrolyzer located at the territory of the EU EEA. In the general topic, you can sell your hydrogen to any off-taker. In the maritime topic, there is a very strict requirement that at least 60% of your produced hydrogen must go to off-takers that belong to the maritime sector. In terms of the timing, so you will see on this slide the timeline. We have opened the call on the 3rd of December. We will close the call on 20th February, 5 p.m. Please really try to avoid submitting your project 2 minutes before 5 p.m. We have cases where, unfortunately, due to IT hiccup, due to issues, projects simply don't go through, and after 5 p.m. the system is closed, and it's really, really bad outcome if due to a couple of minutes we cannot accept your project. So please have this in mind. Don't put this to the very, very last minute. Then we will evaluate the proposals between March and May. We will go through the evaluation later, and by June we would like to announce the results, and at the latest by November 25, but hopefully earlier we will be signing the winning projects grant agreements. All relevant information for your application is available on EU and Funding Tenders portal. There you have 2 specific links related to the auction, dependent on the topic, so please select the right topic under which you will be preparing your application. Please always have in mind that we have fully electronic system for submission of proposals, so you have to work with the templates, submission forms that are contained in this portal, and you can use only those. And please do follow the templates strictly. It is important that you don't alter the templates, modify the language, and so on. This is because we have strict conditions ensuring equal treatment of our applicants. So please have this in mind. And again, it is sort of a sad outcome if we have to pronounce your project inadmissible because some of these templates were modified, which would then breach the equal treatment of applications. There is a lot of material that we already mentioned. You have this also listed here, even though it's not that readable, but you have all the links here. There are tutorials on how to prepare your application. There is a very good tutorial on how to work with the financial information file, which is a mandatory document that you have to submit. There is a very important document, a Q&A, which contains already a host of questions that are critical and maybe essential for many of you. So please read through all these documents thoroughly and attentively. If you have any remaining question, we are, of course, ready to answer it through our help desk. And we will do so throughout this period of time while the call is open. So my suggestion to all of you, please read through the call documents. First of all, look at the Q&A document, look at the recordings, read again the Q&A session, because there may be questions coming back to your mind. And if you have remaining questions, don't hesitate to use the help desk. I must say this because I also would want to prevent that we are delayed with the answers if we are flooded with, let's say, trivial questions. So please really read the documents that are available before you put the questions in the help desk. This is, I think, self-explanatory. You need to create your user account on the tender portal. You have to register your organization, and then you can work with the forms and documents that are in the portal. The application consists of Part A, that is an administrative information, Part B, which is the technical description of your project, Part C, that is a KPI list, and very important annexes that are mandatory, and you have also supporting documents that you are asked to submit. We'll get to that. And again, there is a help desk available if you have questions. So this is how the proposal is composed. I already mentioned Part A, Part B, and Part C. They are mandatory, but also under mandatory annexes that you see on this slide, the budget table, the calculator or financial information file is an essential document that must be submitted fully and duly filled in. Please follow the tutorial on how to fill it in, because this financial information file contains your bid. And while evaluating, we must be very clear on what your bid is about. Therefore, please have a very good understanding of how to work with that file. Then there are other information that you need to submit, and please really do so. Do not omit any of the required information, because again, we have to make sure that your application is complete before it can be assessed. What we do first when we close the call, we first start with admissibility and eligibility checks. Admissibility means that your proposal must be submitted before the call deadline, obviously, that it's submitted electronically, that it's complete, meaning Part A, Part B, Part C, and all the mandatory annexes and documents that are required in the call, and that it's readable, accessible, and printable. Readable, we have seen in the past calls that some of the proposals had parts of their application forms that were blank, that were not readable. Unfortunately, that we cannot accept. So please make sure before you push the button for submission that your application contains all the information that you intended to have therein. On the eligibility, that's the second step. The eligibility criteria and requirements are stipulated in the call text. You have them listed here on the slide. I will not just read them, but the key requirements are: you have to be a legal entity established anywhere in the world. The project, meaning the hydrogen production capacity, the electrolyzer, must be located on the territory of the EU or EEA country. The project must have a higher capacity of production than 5 megawatts electric of the electrolyzer. The duration of your project is important. That's a new requirement in this auction. We are expecting mature projects in the auction. Okay, this is really an auction. It is not a call that rewards so much the innovation. For that, we have a general course that will be presented next week. That means that your project must be in position to reach financial close within 2.5 years after grant agreement signature, and enter into operation within 5 years from the signature of a grant agreement, and then produce your hydrogen over 10 years or faster if the capacity with which you bid is reached earlier. So these are the conditions, the critical conditions that you have. Of course, there are new requirements related to resilience. Those also need to be abided, so we will get to that also in the next presentations. So please, again, read thoroughly the requirements for admissibility and eligibility. These are the first steps. If the proposal misses any of these, it doesn't go ahead with the evaluation, and it will be eliminated in the early stage. And it's always a pity if we have to eliminate the project at this stage, because you have invested a lot of time into your application, which is simply not admissible or eligible. In terms of the application process, again, I will not repeat what was already explained, because I think everything that you see on this slide was already mentioned. Just make sure that you have a very good understanding of the conditions and requirements of the call. That is really critical before you start working on your application. I think we have mentioned that as well, that you see here. Here, the important, of course, the most important part are the resilience requirements, the limitation when it comes to sourcing of electrolysis stacks from China, the compliance with the ISO standard, and the cybersecurity requirements that are, again, mandatory for every single applicant in the call. What we also check, and that is important, it is somehow placed in the call document, but I also would want to raise the importance of this. For those projects that will pass the evaluation and that will be invited for the grant agreement preparation, we will also have to do financial capacity checks, which means that it is the requirement of the financial regulation that any applicant must have stable and sufficient resources to implement the action. Have this in mind when working on your application, because, again, we will need to check that this is true during the grant agreement preparation, and we will then have to take the necessary measures if it comes to that. The operational capacity means that you have to have the know-how, the capacity to implement the project. This is part of the quality criterion, and we will get to that later. And you must not be in any of the exclusion situations described in the call. So please have really good reading there and understand what these conditions are before you go for preparing your application. I already mentioned the completeness, which is important. I know it's bureaucratic requirement, but it is a key requirement that ensures that we have equal treatment of all applicants. We cannot accept the applications that are not complete, that do not fulfill all the requirements, whether it comes to the substance or quality of the information that is prescribed in the call text. Use always the mandatory forms and do not modify them. Please do not do that. We have seen cases in the previous auction where the letter of intent from the financial institution for the completion guarantee, which is a mandatory requirement, was modified. And that led to elimination of the project because we cannot accept if the mandatory templates are simply modified. So please do not do that. It is not worth it. Ensure always that your application is readable. Make sure that before you submit or you push the button, you double check that all the information is there. And then, of course, check that the capacity of your electrolyzer goes beyond 5 megawatts and your price is not shooting over €4 per kilo of RFNBO hydrogen. Here you can see some examples where we unfortunately had to pronounce the projects inadmissible. Again, going back to the list of mandatory documents and supporting documents that are listed in the call, you have to provide the renewable electricity sourcing strategy based on the requirements that are explained in the call text, so every single point there needs to be addressed. You also need to provide evidence of the process that you have started in terms of permitting procedures. And why this is important? Because you need to be in the position to reach financial close within 2.5 years. Without the permits, you would simply not be able to do that. So please make sure that it is the case. Other cases that you see on the screen, I will not read through all of them. You, I think, can read and understand what we mean. I would only mention again the importance of the financial information file that must be filled in duly, properly, and according to the guidance that you will find in there. And of course, please avoid the situation that you go over the page limit that is allowed. Unfortunately, we work with automated systems. So if your application goes above the page limit, those pages that go beyond that will be blanked. So we will not be able to read through them, and that means that you may be missing an important part of your application that simply cannot be reflected while we'll be evaluating the projects. Then on the eligibility, of course, have double-checked that the amount of the grant you will ask, which is a multiplication of your bidding price and the volume, doesn't go above the maximum threshold established in the call text for the two topics, which is 250 million for the general topic or 200 million for the maritime topic. That your installed capacity goes above 5 megawatts electric, that your bid price doesn't go above 4 euros per kilo, and you will respect the two deadlines that are very firmly established in the call document. Now, on the just a graphical description of how the procedure for evaluation works. So first, once we close the call, we go for admissibility eligibility check. This is really a formal check whether your proposals are complete and all the requirements that I already mentioned. Then we go to the evaluation itself, which is assessment of the proposals against the award criteria established in the call, the relevance, quality, and the bid price, which alone determines the ranking. So the projects will be, at the end of the day, ranked based on your price. This is an auction, so that's why. And then, of course, based on the ranking, we will clear the auction and draw the line for those projects that can get funded by the Innovation Fund and those that, unfortunately, would not be in position to be funded. Now, we have a cascade process that is described also in the call, which means that once we close the auction, let's say we receive 100 applications, we pre-rank them based on the price. This is to make sure that we assess and go deeper into the evaluation for those projects that have high chances to be passed on and still to fulfill the conditions of the call. So those projects that will fit within the budget of a topic, that would fit within the budgets of the national funding windows, so Austria, Spain, and Lithuania, plus the reasonable number of projects that would be fitting within the reserve list. So we normally go in the multiple of the maximum budget for the auction. Those projects will then be assessed against the criteria of quality and relevance, and if they pass, there will be a final ranking based purely on your price. So that will be the final determinant for ranking the projects. And as mentioned by Johanna and colleagues before, also the member states that have opened their funding windows will respect the results of the evaluation in the auction, and they have to respect the ranking order that is coming from our evaluation, which means that they will also be negotiating the projects, if relevant, according to that order. Here, I'm sorry for the coloring. Not sure that it's really well readable. Sometimes we have weird things happening in our system, but the point is to explain in which situation you can be sent to the member state funding window if your proposals pass the evaluation under the auction, meaning that you fulfill all the conditions that I just mentioned. If your project fits within the funding window of that particular member state, if you have given us the consent in the application form that essentially we can propose your project to the member state, then your project will be passed on to that member state, and then the member state takes over. And as explained before, they will continue negotiating, discussing, signing the grant agreement, and essentially supporting your project. I hope this is clear. And a final slide that is just a different representation of the procedure that we already mentioned, that I was already explaining in detail, so I don't think we need to go and repeat ourselves. In terms of the timing, it was already mentioned before. We have this timeline ahead. It's this time the slide also contains, let's say, the full life cycle of the projects that will be succeeding in this auction. And as you see, there are legal checkpoints in the whole procedure. Don't please forget to have in mind that for those projects that will pass the evaluation and will be invited for the grant agreement preparation, you will have to be in position to provide your completion guarantee within 2 months since you have been invited. And that is important deadline. And then, of course, you have all the other time points here on the slide that are also explained in the call itself. Okay, so I suggest that we stop here. I hope it was not too overwhelming, and we would give the floor to questions. I suggest that I start reading them, and then we see who can answer them from colleagues in the room, okay? So the first question, have there been any relevant changes between the publication of the final terms and conditions in September and the call text published with the opening of the auction on 3rd December 24?
Thank you, Roman. Yes, there have been 3 key changes from the final terms and conditions that were published on our website and the call text document that we have now in the EU Funding Santander portal. And at that regard, I want to bring attention to everyone that the only authoritative text is the call text. So I invite you please to revise and read in detail the call text, because it will be the legally binding one. So the 3 key aspects that has been changed are all of them in the Annex 2 of the call text. One, it relates to the conditions to the information required from off-takers to integrated projects. We have simplified those requirements for projects applying into the general topic. That means that in this case, projects that are applying into the general topic that are integrated projects, that means that the producer of hydrogen and the off-taker is the same legal entity. At this time, we'll have to present the same information that we were requesting last year. They will have to present, instead of head of terms with the off-taker, they can present a letter signed by a director or an internal executive, confirming that the facility is reserved for the off-take of the produced hydrogen, and providing a list of information like the name of the facility that will be off-taking the hydrogen, and the different characteristics under which this hydrogen will be off-take. For the maritime topic, the requirement stays the same as in the terms and conditions. That means that if the project is integrated, it will not be enough to present a letter by a director, but the off-taker will be the entity of taking the derivative product. So if the hydrogen is transformed into ammonia, for example, the project participating in the maritime topic will still have to present head of terms with the off-taker of the ammonia, and it will have to prove that that off-taker belongs to the maritime sector. That is one of the changes. The second change is just an expansion on the information that we are requesting on resilience criteria and the electrolyzer procurement strategy. It's not new by itself, it's just an expansion of the requirements that we are requesting. So this time we are more specific on the contents that the MOU with the electrolyzer procurement, with the electrolyzer supplier has to have. And the third difference is also an expansion of information about what information we're requesting for those projects that are dependent on energy infrastructure. Again, this information is not new, we have just expanded exactly the type of information that we are requesting. Those are the 3 main changes.
Thank you, Javier. Let's look at the second question. Can 2 different applications be prepared and filed for the same project under the general topic and under maritime topic, given that the project can choose between off-takers from the maritime sector and non-maritime sector? My answer is yes, as long as these are 2 different projects, but colleagues, you can complement.
No, exactly. So yes, as long as they are 2 different projects, also means no if it's the same project. So you cannot submit the same project to both windows. If you're a project with 60% offtake or more from maritime, however, you have the choice which window to apply to. So we don't force you into the maritime window. You can still apply to the general window if you prefer, even if you have more than 60% of your offtake going to a maritime offtaker.
Thank you. Next question. Can you confirm that the cost of hydrogen produced in an electrolyzer funded by this auction cannot be considered as eligible cost in a net zero technologies proposal? And if this hydrogen has been funded by a mechanism auction as a service by country like Austria and Spain, would this be eligible as relevant cost? Evelina?
Yes, so this question has to be seen in the light of our rules on the combined support. So basically, if the project signs the grant agreement and will receive a grant under the Innovation Fund auction, it cannot combine it with support for the same installation. So if it is, if the support is coming from the national sources, if it is a state aid, but also if the support is coming from other EU funding program. Usually we give examples of other programs, but that also covers the innovation fund. And the same rules hold for the auction as a service. So basically such situation wouldn't be possible because we have the rules on the combined support, and it is the same under auction as a service.
Okay, thank you. This was very clear. On the 24 auction, our off-taker will purchase the hydrogen and convert it into derivative fuel for the maritime sector. The off-taker will sell the fuel to clients within the maritime industry. Does the off-taker meet the definition of belonging to the maritime sector as outlined in the terms and conditions?
Yes, so in this case, the off-taker that is transforming the hydrogen into a derivative will have still to prove that it is engaged in bunkering activities within a port of the EEA. So if the off-taker is transforming itself, the hydrogen into derivative fuel, and it can prove that it's indeed engaged in those bunkering activities, and it can be endorsed by a relevant entity as required in the context, yes, it would be eligible as part of the maritime topic.
Thank you, Javier. What if hydrogen is not the final product, but is a byproduct for e-fuels production?
So it's perfectly fine to transform your hydrogen into any possible hydrogen derivative. What we subsidize is the production of hydrogen volumes. What you do with that hydrogen, we're totally agnostic about. So yes, that's possible. However, we don't fund CapEx costs of transforming the hydrogen into something else.
Thank you. That was very clear. The application requires sensitive and confidential information, especially pre-contractual agreements. How is the confidentiality of the information provided with the application guaranteed? I can answer that. Well, it is a legal obligation that you provide all the required information in the call, and of course that we have all the necessary measures in the IT systems that any of this information is kept confidential. It is our duty to protect the confidentiality of the information, and that is of course fully respected. So no, you don't need to worry about that. Which data points will you make public after the auction? What do I consent to by applying?
Yes. So, well, as many of you know, one of the key objectives of this call is to support the creation of a market for hydrogen in Europe, and also to help price discovery. So for projects that have been selected, we will be publishing information such as the name of the applicant. We will be publishing information about the grant that has been awarded. We will be also publishing this time the origin of the electrolyzer that is intended to be procured by the project, and we will also be publishing the bid price. For projects that have not been selected, we will be publishing information in an anonymized manner. So we will be publishing, for example, the average bid price across all applicants that have been received. On information about and concerning the offtake prices, for example, we will be publishing anonymized and aggregated information about the offtake prices that we have received, both on selected and applicants.
Yes, and again, you can refer to the call text where the information to be published are explicitly listed, so you can review that. Will there be a different process and an additional application to participate in AAS? No, there won't. You apply only once. We will do, so you do your job, we do our job, and as the outcome you will be ranked, and then in case you fulfill the criteria and you gave us your consent, as I mentioned before, your application will be passed on to the relevant member state authority, and they will take over. So you will not need to reapply again. Yeah, okay. Okay, next Question: can the hydrogen be converted into a derivative fuel for the maritime sector and be covered with this coal?
Although we are accepting projects that are converting, of course, the hydrogen into a derivative fuel, and in the case that the off-taker is the same legal entity as the producer, we will call that an integrated project. We want to be very clear that the only product that we will be paying for is RFNBO hydrogen production. So if a project is producing RFNBO hydrogen and transforming it into derivative fuel, it can participate still in the coal, it can participate into the maritime sector coal topic, but it will only be receiving payments due to the hydrogen production. And for that purpose, as part of the off-taker strategy, it will have to present information about the conversion factors between the hydrogen and the derivative, indeed.
Thank you, Javier. Next question. This call seems related to hydrogen production, but does the call also include infrastructure projects for electrification, e.g. maritime sector? The answer is no. Unfortunately, we are purely focused on volumes of verified and certified RFNBO hydrogen as the outcome of your project. If you have in mind projects addressing the innovative solutions for the sectors covered by the EU ETS, I invite you to follow us next week, where we will present the 2 calls where such projects can be indeed submitted. Stephanie.
Now, just to say, in that context, indeed, good if you follow next week's info day on the general grants call, where electrification projects are eligible, but not infrastructure projects.
Next, is there any limitation on the origin of the beneficiaries of the auction?
No, in terms of beneficiaries who will be in the consortium which will sign the grant agreement, there are no limitations on the origin. The only limitation on the origin that we have is on the sourcing of electrolyzer stacks. So those two not to be confused.
Maybe as a small addition, there are some excluded beneficiaries. So, for example, companies that are on a sanctions list, etc., they are not eligible, and that's outlined in the call text in the eligibility section as well.
Okay, thank you. And what will happen with unawarded funds from previous auctions?
Well, funds that are not awarded that have been unawarded in previous auctions have been rolled out into the budget of the current of the innovation fund, and it has been included as part of the budget that has been published in this auction, indeed.
Yeah. So as a rule, any unused funds are rolled over to the next and following calls under the innovation fund. Colleagues are signaling that these were all the questions. So thank you very much for following us for a very dense morning. I suggest we now take a 10 minutes break to stretch our legs and have some coffee, and then we shall be back in 10 minutes, let's say 11:25, let's say, and we start the next session also to be on time. We will have further deep dive into award criteria, and looking forward to meet you there. Thank you. Okay, let's continue. Welcome back. For those who have joined us, welcome to the Info Day for 2024 RFMBO Hydrogen Auction Call under the Innovation Fund. We have spent some time in the morning into general descriptions of the scope and key requirements of the call itself. Now we will plunge deeper into the evaluation criteria itself, and I pass the floor to Alban Vital, who is a Senior Financial Engineering Manager in CINEA, and Lorena Iglesias, who is the Head of Sector in the Innovation Fund unit team. So Lorena, Alban, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Roman. So we are going to walk you through the evaluation criteria and the called assessment structure. So we have two awarded criteria, the relevance and the quality. In the relevance, we are checking that your proposal is in line with the objectives of the call, which are the producing RNFBO hydrogen and to achieving security of supply of essential goods and contributing to the Europeans' industrial leadership and competitiveness. And the quality, we're going to check the project readiness to achieve the two main milestones to reach financial close in 2.5 years and entry in operation in 5 years after the grant signature. For that criteria, we are going to check 3 criteria: the technical maturity, financial maturity, and operational maturity. These both awarded criteria are pass or fail. If the project or the proposal is passing both criteria, then, as explained before by Roman, it will be ranking according to the bidding price, and then it will be funded. This is within the limit of the available budget. We have in the application several documents already explained by the colleagues. We have the annex, which are required and mandatory annex, like the renewable electricity sourcing strategy, the hydrogen offtake and price hedging strategy, electrolyzer procurement strategy, plan to receive environmental permits in time, the plan to receive the grid connection permits in time, feasibility study, which is a new annex that it's a new comparing with the last year call, and the completion guarantee, letter of intent. Yeah, in the awarded criteria, in the relevance criteria, we're checking the 2 points, the production of RNFBO hydrogen, meaning that the final product that it will be supported by the auction, it's a renewable fuel of non-biological origin hydrogen as defined in the Renewable Energy Directive under delegated acts. And this is based on the technical characteristics and the scope of the project. And for the maritime topic, the project should confirm that at least 60% of the RNFBO hydrogen will be dedicated to off-takers in the maritime sector. In the second relevance criteria, the achieving security of supply of essential goods and contribution to the Europe's industrial leadership and competitiveness, is the resilience criteria already explained by the colleagues, limiting the sourcing of the electrolyzer stacks with surface treatment, self-unit production or stack assembly carried out in China to no more than 25% in megawatt electric of the total electrolyzer capacity as expressed in the bid and in all the relevant documents of the proposal. In this specific criteria, with more details of what we refer on these 3 elements, the electrolyzer stack should be considered a source in China if any of the following steps took place in China. The first one is the surface treatment, meaning the coating techniques of the electrolyzer cells, electrodes, membrane, or stack bipolar plates. The cell unit production, meaning the manufacturing of the key components of the electrolyzer cells in the electrodes, and depending on the electrolyzer technology, the membrane, diaphragm, or solid electrolyte. And the stack assembly, meaning the workmanship needed to assemble the electrolyzer stack with all its functional elements to separate the hydrogen and the oxygen from the water. Okay, the applicants must prove and provide sufficient evidence in the application to underpin that their claims that their sourcing are not coming from China with this limit of 25%. For example, in providing MOUs with electrolyzer supplier with all these details. In the quality awarded criteria, we are going to check the technical, financial, and operational maturity of the project, confirming the readiness of the project to achieve the mandatory milestones after the grant agreement signature, meaning that the project will reach financial close within 2.5 years after the grant agreement signature, and entry in operation within 5 years. For the check of this awarded criteria, in the technical maturity, we're checking the technical characteristics of the project, the location of the project implementation plan, and the key aspects of the technical characteristics of the projects which are defined in the feasibility study. The financial maturity will be checked against the project business and financing plan, and the operational maturity, the competence and experience of the project team, counting with the sufficient resources and know-how to implement the project successfully. We'll go more in details on these 3 sub-criteria. In the technical maturity, we are checking the technical characteristics of the project, the main design elements of the proposal, the equipment that will be installed, type of technology, the key elements of the project location. This information, it will be reflected in the Part B, form Part B, and in the feasibility study. In the project implementation plan, we need to see the timeline for obtaining the required permits, the environmental permits, and the grid access, achieving the project's planned financial close within the time limits of the context in 2.5 years, the EPC contracting, and the achieving and in operation in the 5 years. You need to provide as well a Gantt chart showing these mandatory deadlines, defining the context, and showing the intermediate milestones to achieve the successful implementation of the project during the complete project lifetime. And then the project should provide as well in the technical maturity all the supporting documents that are listed in Section 5 of the context, meaning the energy source strategy, the feasibility study, offtake and price hedging strategy, equipment procurement strategy, and the status of permits, license, and authorizations to prove that the project will be able to achieve these permits, environmental permit, and grid access in time to achieve these mandatory milestones. The technical maturity of the proposals is evaluated against the soundness, credibility, and consistency of the information provided. So the credibility of the feasibility study and the implementation arrangement, the consistency, very important, between all the pre-contractual steps to secure this renewable energy and the volumes expected to have the certification of the RNFPO hydrogen production according to the Renewable Energy Directive and the delegated acts. The consistency of the renewable electricity sourcing strategy with the bid and what is reflected as well in the financial information file. The credible plan to achieve the required permits on time, meaning the environmental permits and any other permits that are required at the national level. The credibly plan to receive the grid connection as well and the energy infrastructure required for the project implementation on time. And the soundness of the basic project parameters, assuming the fuel load hours, the hydrogen offtake profiles, electrolyzer efficiency. All this information should be coherent and it will be consistent across all the documents provided under the proposal. So the objective is to assess that the project is ready and it will achieve these 2 milestones within the time foreseen in the context after the grant agreement signature. We see in some proposals, as Roman mentioned before, that some proposals are not complete or they are missing information. So it's very important that you provide all the mandatory annexes that are listed in the context. They provide a detailed information and consistent. Okay, so ensure that you provide in the feasibility study all the details that they are asking for in the template. Also, be sure that this information is completed, the implementation plan is coherent and is realistic. So it's in line, the required permittings are in line with the mandatory milestones of the project. You have to provide an explanation as well of the status of the required permits and the infrastructure for projects that are also dependent or external infrastructure that are beyond the boundaries of the project. They need to prove that these installations will be ready when the project will reach entry in operation as planned. And also the state of play in terms of equipment supply, geographical origin of the key components, and the procurement strategy, as mentioned before, as part of the equipment supply strategy. All this information should be consistent between all the documents, so the application form Part B, the feasibility study, the renewable electricity sourcing strategy, the offtake strategy, financial information file, and all the documents provided in the application form. The renewable energy sourcing strategy, it should be credible, so to be substantiated with agreements or pre-agreements by the energy suppliers. At least this 60% of the required total energy volumes should be proved during the project implementation period. Head of terms or any other formats of pre-contractual signed term sheets must be provided to prove that these negotiations are already advanced. For the electrolyzer procurement strategy, we are requiring, the proposals are required to submit memorandum of understanding, letter of intent, or any other form of pre-contractual signed term sheets with electrolyzer manufacturing, confirming that they are in line with the requirements of the context. Again, you need to be sure that all the information provided in the documents is consistency amongst the Part B, feasibility study, and all the strategy, and the financial information file. For the financial maturity, I pass the floor to Alban.
Thank you, Lorena. So for the financial maturity, we will look as well at trying to assess the project capacity to reach financial close in 2.5 years, as well as reaching operational maturity within 5 years. So there is three bases. So we will look at the business plan, we'll look at the financing plan, and we'll look at the offtake strategy. Those elements you need to fill in the application form B, section 2.2, as well as the financial information file. Please make sure that for those two documents, as well as the offtake strategy, there is consistency, we can follow through the various items input, such as revenues and costs across all those three documents. If we now look at the business model, you will need to explain us what is the business model of your project. Obviously, it's about producing RFNBO hydrogen, but tell us a bit more about, is it an integrated project? Is it a standalone project? Do you have the energy, renewable energy, which is produced, which is part of your project or not? Do you directly have the hydrogen that you produce, which is used by your project, or do you sell it to someone else, so that we understand what is the scope of your project? It's also important for us to understand if there is, for example, hydrogen which is sold, or hydrogen which is used to produce some derivatives such as methanol or ammonia, and what are the end sector to which the hydrogen is going to be sold to. Regarding the revenue mainstream, so please indicate what are the various streams of revenue. So typically you will have hydrogen, some heat, then you will need to tell us on the off-taker sectors if they are industrial. Is it about refining? Is it about chemical? Is it about steel productions where your hydrogen is going to be used? Is it in the transport sector? Is it heavy duty, or is it SAF? If it's a maritime sector, as we said, there is a dedicated topic for that sector. Please include the breakdown on the price and volume for those off-takers, so that we have per off-takers the price and volume, and we've got a better granularity on where the end product is going to. On the cost assumptions regarding the CapEx and OpEx, the OpEx being mostly the renewable electricity. So you've got the full strategy on renewable electricity that you need to provide us. And on the CapEx, please make sure that you develop the various items, being the development cost, the procurement of the equipment, the construction cost, and the power plant if it's on site. Regarding the financing plan, what we will look at is the various type of funding, source of funding that you use. So typically, you will be using equity, potentially some shareholder loans. Maybe you will have some external debt. So we need to understand which portion of the financing is coming from those three elements. Please also give us the financial standing of the shareholders. So typically, we need to know if you've got an equity investors who's likely to invest, need to invest 100 million into the project. You need to be able to demonstrate that this 100 million will be actually provided by that shareholder. So it's very important for us to know literally what are the sources of the financing, so the type of sources, and for you to provide as well the demonstration that those amounts of either debt or equity or shareholder loan can be provided by either the equity investors or the bank providing the external financing. So the full source and uses will need also to be provided. And we will look at also the financial viability of the project. So typically when you fill in the financial information file, it's important for us and for you to demonstrate that every single year there is sufficient cash flow to sustain the activity and keep the production going of hydrogen. And that is often demonstrated by having actually the full financial information file with cash flow generating every year. If in some years you don't generate enough cash flow, can you substantiate that you generated cash flow in previous year in substantial amount in order to offset the years which would be negative cash flow wise? Is there some contingency line, for example, that you put in place? So please explain us and demonstrate us that your project stands on two legs and that you have a viable financial project. Finally, on the funding structure, it's important for us to understand what are the various legal entities involved, where is the equity being injected and where is the debt being injected? Is it in an SPV or is it in a parent entity? Is the structure being a recourse or a non-recourse in case you've got some project finance, some external financing? So please explain us the legal structure and the various injections of debt and equity and where do they go, in which legal entity. Regarding the offtake and the price hedging strategy, so this is one of the annex that needs to be provided. It is important that when you describe the offtake strategy, that you fill in all the various elements. So you literally, we've listed from A to F the various elements that needs to be provided in the strategy. So provide the explanation for each of those for 100% of the offtake. That's just for the strategy I'm talking about. And then when we are looking at providing some pre-contractual steps, so typically what we would expect is signed head of terms or signed term sheets. For this, you need to provide 60% of the volume. So again, for this head of terms, so signed term sheet or signed head of terms, you need to have listed the components A to F, which are so the name of the offtaker, the sectors of the offtakers, the volume, the pricing structure that you select, the duration of the agreement, as well as the method of delivery. It is also important in the body of the main strategy to explain the dependent energy infrastructure. So sometimes we call it connected project. So typically the main example would be if you have a pipeline which is not part of your project, but let's say the pipeline is part of the hydrogen network that is being developed. Please tell us when is that pipeline will become live. Tell us that the timeline for this pipeline is aligned with the production timeline of your own project, so that we can truly believe that the way the hydrogen that you produce will be transported will be in a pipeline that will be there at the point you enter into operation. So it's important for you to demonstrate that when you have some dependent energy infrastructure which is outside of the scope of your project, you can clearly explain us when they will become live, and that it will tie with the timing of your own project. If we now look at typically the maritime sector, so for the maritime sector, as already explained, if you've got an integrated project, so for integrated project, we will request you to have a maritime off-taker. So it's not only, so you will have a maritime off-taker where you will need to receive from this maritime off-taker the head of contractual terms. So typically it will be a signed term sheet or a signed head of terms from the off-taker, which is a maritime, even for an integrated project. So that we go one step further. So when it's an integrated project on the normal call, you can have a director of your own company or a senior executive of your own company that provides a letter with the various components from A to F, demonstrating that at least 60% of the RFNBO hydrogen used is used internally. That's for the normal call, so that's sufficient. While for the maritime call, you need to have still an off-taker from the maritime sectors, even if it's an integrated project, so meaning that you're producing not only the hydrogen, but the ammonia also yourself, or the e-fuel that will be used for the maritime yourself. Then you need to provide as well the head of terms from this maritime off-taker. On the last point is the hedging strategy. For the hedging strategy, what we really try to look for is that to demonstrate that you've understood the linkage between the variation of the renewable power fluctuation and the hydrogen price fluctuation. So typically, if you've got a pass-through mechanism in which the various fluctuation of renewable energy is passed through into the price of the RFNBO hydrogen you sell to the off-taker too, that's the best outcome. But if you have any other type of hedging strategy, typically if you use some kind of financial instrument to hedge yourself, please explain to us in what way the hedging strategy that you use is actually covering the fluctuation risk between energy and hydrogen price. We'll now spend a little bit of time on how to best fill in the financial information file. So the financial information file, which is available on the funding and tender portal, is also called detailed budget table, so just in case you're looking for it. And this financial information file, you need to only fill in the cells which are in yellow in the input tab. So the other tabs, literally, you don't need to input anything. And those input needs to be in thousands of euros, so in K euros. If those are revenues, they need to be in positive. If those are costs, they need to be in negative numbers. The fixed premium, which is the actual bid that you're submitting, will need to be inputted in cell G47, and cell G48 will be the official bid. Cell G48 just truncate with maximum two decimal what you put in cell G47. If you put directly the right amount with only two decimal in G47, then G48 will be exactly the same bid number. The expected yearly average volume is calculated automatically by the FIF, taking into account all the off-takers volume that you're selling to. And obviously that expected yearly average volume multiplied by the bid price will give you the total grant amount. This total grant amount, you can find it in cell D68 of the FIF. So this total grant amount is the amount of grant that you officially request to us. So it's important that when in other part of the application, such as part A or part B, you use the grant amount which is coming from the financial information file, cell D68. Use always that same amount, so to avoid having some inconsistency across the various application forms. Finally, the completion guarantee amount. This one is also calculated automatically as 8% of the total grant amount in cell D70. So the amount that you need to use and share with your bank in order to have the proper letter of intent and further on the completion guarantee is the one that you find in cell D70 of the financial information file. I might add something which is obvious, but please make sure that there is a coherence between the various input in terms of cost, of price, or volume that you put into the FIF and that we can extract from the electrolyzer procurement strategy, that we can find in the energy sourcing strategy and in the offtake strategy. And all the narrative that you explain in the part 2, so the application form B, needs also, those numbers need to tie in, and we need to be able to easily find them back and trace them back into the financial information file. Drilling down even a bit further into the financial information file. So as explained earlier, we are all about producing RFNBO hydrogen. However, from time to time, the energy you receive or you purchase may not be fully renewable electricity, which means that at some point you may produce some non-RFNBO hydrogen. So this is allowed. However, you need to ensure that you reach at least 70% of GHG savings, and that you do not contribute to the cross-subsidization rules as per the call text. So there is a limit to the amount of non-RFNBO strategy, that non-RFNBO hydrogen that you can produce as part of your project. On the installed capacity, so in cell G51 of the input sheet of the financial information file, you need to put the full installed capacity, meaning the capacity to produce the RFNBO hydrogen as well as the capacity to produce the non-RFNBO hydrogen. So that's the full capacity of your plant and your electrolyzer. On the revenue sections, so typically you will have RFNBO revenues, which needs to be inserted volume and price from line 90 to line 117. So typically you will see that you will have several lines of revenues of volume and price. For each off-taker that you have on the RFNBO hydrogen, you need to, for each of them, let's say you have 3 off-takers, then you will need to fill in 3 lines with volume and 3 lines with price, and you can leave the other lines blank. If you have 1 off-taker, then you just fill in 1 line with volume, 1 line with price, and you leave the other lines blank. If you now are into an integrated project, so typically you are consuming your own RFNBO hydrogen, then you will need to do the volume and price input in line 120 and 122. If you end up into, for example, a case where you've got 50%, I consume 50% of my production and I sell to an external off-taker 50% of my production, then you will put 50% of your volume and price in line 120 and 122, and you will put the other 50% into the line 90 to 117 for those external off-taker. If you have non-RFNBO hydrogen, then the volume and the price of such product goes in line 130 to line 137. For the sourcing of electricity, so typically the power, the same split apply. If you've got renewable power, then it will go in line 189 to 233. Again, you've got several lines of input. If you've got only one source of renewable power, then you just fill in 1 line of power cost and 1 line of volume. If you've got 2 different sources, then you fill in 2 lines of power cost and 2 lines of volume, and you leave the other yellow cells blank. If it's an integrated project, so typically by integrated we mean here that you produce yourself your electricity, so the PV farm or the wind farm is part of the project. So either you've got the capex, which is of this PV farm and solar farm, which are part of the scope of your project, and then you put this capex element into the capex section of the input sheet, and then you only add the volume of electricity that this PV plant or wind farm that you own will actually generate. So only the volume needs to be inserted into the integrated, so in between line 237 and 241. If on the other side you decide, okay, I've got my own PV farm and wind farm, but the capex of this my own PV farm and wind farm is not part of the project, then you can still put the power, so the volume and the cost, which is the price of buying your own electricity, as well in those lines 237 to 241. And finally, if it's non-RFNBO power that you buy, you put those, the volume and the cost into the line 250 to 262. We now move to the completion guarantee. As explained at the application stage, you will need all to submit a letter of intent for the completion guarantee. And this letter of intent needs to be issued by a bank or financial institution within the EEA with a minimum, which is also an institution which is approved to conduct such a business in the EEA, with a minimum rating of BBB- by S&P and Fitch, or Baa3 by Moody's, or BBB low by DBRS. Please use the template and do not change that template. That's extremely important. Otherwise, you're at risk of being ineligible and not being selected. On the completion guarantee, so that will be only for the projects which are selected and have the lowest bid. So when those projects are invited for the grant agreement preparation, they will have 2 months from that point onwards to provide a full completion guarantee by financial institutions with the same minimum ratings, covering the 8% of the maximum grant. The validity of this completion guarantee will be until 6 months after the maximum time to entry into operations, which means that from the signing of the grant agreement, it's 5.5 years. And same thing, the template must be used and not altered. Having a quick look at some of the lessons learned from the previous auctions. So please ensure that in the CapEx you detailed and give some credible explanation. So typically between line 347 to line 375 of the financial information file, you've got the various items of the CapEx that you need to describe. Make sure that it ties back to the electrolyzer procurement strategy, that we can find or trace back where is the source of those CapEx. In terms of the source of equity and the debt financing used, make sure it's sufficiently described. So who is likely to provide those, the equity and the debt, and please demonstrate that they have the financial capacity to provide such an amount. So if you've got a very tiny project with just an SPV who is with a very small balance sheet, and you're telling us that there is 100 million that needs to be raised as equity, you need to explain a little bit more than that. It needs to be credible that if you inject 100 million of equity into a tiny SPV which has only a couple of million of balance sheet, where does the money come from? You need to demonstrate that and explain it clearly into the application form. Then for the off-stake strategy, ensure that for the pre-contractual signed term sheet, make sure that they encompasses all the elements requested from A to F, and we literally mean all. So if there is one missing, again, you're at risk. So that's very important for you to look into detail into the annex of what is requested for every one of those strategies. And then finally, as explained, when it comes to letter of intent and completion guarantee, there is no text change is allowed, so please use the template as is. Thank you very much. I'll now pass back the floor to Lorena.
Yes, thank you, Alban. So finally, the last awarded criteria under the quality is the operational maturity. For the operational maturity, the applicant should prove that they have the competence and the experience and the resources to successfully implement the project, meaning of these resources, human resources and technical resources and others. Exceptionally, if they don't have the resources at the time of the application, they can also provide the explanation of the measures that they will apply to obtain the required operational resources in time for the project implementation. Okay, under this criteria, operational maturity, the applicants should provide the project organization diagrams with all the stakeholders, and you should reproduce this organizational setup of your project, which is in the part B of the proposals, part B, the technical description of the application, part B. Okay. In addition, the consortium beneficiaries and other participants needs to present a description of the consortium on all the affiliated entities that will be involved on the action, on the project implementation, and the overall project-specific expertise, number of employees, geographical locations, and all the resources needed for the implementation of the project, the relationship between the participants in the project framework. If a consortium is leading the project, they need to define clearly what are the roles of the different members of the consortium, the project teams and the staff, even for the management team and the operational, also the decision-making structure and the quality assurance and monitoring. So please attach the project supporting documents to prove this expertise in the participant information, the role of each of the participants in the project, and the competence and expertise of the applicants and their teams, including the operational resources, human resources, technicals, and other, and the governance structure of the consortium implementing to the project, the decision-making structure, and all the governance structure of this consortium, and the contractual and legal relationships between the participants in the project. The applicants should demonstrate that they have the know-how, the qualification, and the resources to successfully implement the project. These are very complex projects, so they need to staff and to provide all the meaningful resources for this implementation according to this project size and supported by description of the qualifications, the profiles, CVs, and qualification and experience of the staff responsible for the managing and implementing this project. The description of the consortium participants, project organization diagrams, and support this information with CVs describing the experience of the key positions in the project team. In addition to the awarded criteria, in the Part B, there are some declarations that need to be confirmed by the applicants. The first part is the FABID conditions, where the applicant should confirm if this project has been already supported by other funds, or that they will not commit to other public support. So these declarations, self-declarations, are included in the Part B, in the Form B. So please read them carefully and confirm yes or no if you agree with the declarations. Then we have the information concerning to other EU grants for the project and the call-specific conditions, and specifically for the resilience criteria, that the project complies with the standard ISO 22734 for the hydrogen generation using water electrolysis, and the cybersecurity plan. So as mentioned before by the colleagues, at the application stage we are asking only a self-declarations, but later during the project implementation we will ask for certificates for the cybersecurity plan and for other means to measure that these declarations are confirmed during the project implementation. And with this, we finish the part of the awarded criteria. We open now the floor for questions and answers.
Okay. Thank you, Lorena and Alban. Again, a dense presentation with a lot of information. For those who haven't been there with us in the morning, all the presentations are recorded and you will be able to review them at the later point in time. Everything will be published on our website soon after this event. So let's try to take a couple of questions that you have posed. First, what are the key points of the financial capacity assessment?
So the financial capacity assessment is something which is done for the various projects which are invited at the grant for the grant agreement, and essentially is the demonstration by the beneficiaries or the beneficiaries, if there are more than one, that they have the financial capacity to provide the equity and the financial robustness to actually support that project and support the implementation of that project. So there is some checks which are done on the balance sheet, the operational cash flow, as well as some various ratio that we use to measure that. This test is done by another agency. It's done by REA. But that's essentially what is the financial capacity used for.
Can you mention which indicators are used?
So you've got 5 indicators, so typically 5 key ratios, which will 3 of them will look at the profitability of the project and the profitability of the parents, and you will have one which will look more at the gearing ratio, so the debt to equity ratio, and one that will look more at the current ratio, so the current asset size compared to the current liability size.
Thank you very much, Alban. So in other words, this is a measure to check whether you as an applicant are well positioned to shoulder the financing expectations for your project. Second question concerning the award criteria. What happens if construction delays and the project does not reach the 5 years? I presume you mean up to entry into operation due to unexpected delays. Can the award be cancelled afterwards?
I can answer that. Thank you. Yeah, we have 2 hard deadlines on the call. This year, the financial close after 2.5 years after the grant signature, and the 5 years for entry into operation. This is a hard deadline. The projects must follow that deadline, and if they are not able to reach that deadline, the project would be terminated and the bond might be called.
And in case the project does not enter into operation on time, within 5 years, the completion guarantee will be called. That is very clearly stated also in the call document. Can the project produce non-RFNBO hydrogen volumes in addition to the RFNBO potentially subsidized volume? Is there any restriction?
So yes, the project can produce some non-RFNBO hydrogen. However, you've got the 2 restrictions, which is that you need to demonstrate for the overall project that you reach 70% GHG reduction, and that there is no cross-subsidiation. So, i.e., we wouldn't want the auction grant to be used in order to produce a significant portion or a majority of hydrogen, which is non-RFNBO. But provided that you fulfill those 2 conditions, there is a small portion of the project that can be non-RFNBO hydrogen.
Maybe one small addition, maybe it's self-explanatory, but you're not being paid for those fractions of non-RFNBO. So the payments are only based on verified and certified RFNBO volume. So even if you produce some non-RFNBO, you won't receive payments based on those.
Thank you. And indeed, you need to fulfill the overall emissivity threshold that is in the call text, so 70%, and there is no cross-subsidization allowed. So that's, I think, the bottom line. Then the next question, what happens if the hydrogen plant or hydrogen derivative plant is sold to another company before the 10 years are up? Okay, I can answer this one. So in essence, you as an applicant in any form in the consortium, whether coordinator or beneficiary, you are obliged to inform us about any change that have a significant impact on your project. So in any case, if the ownership of your plant happens, this will need to be done through an amendment to your contract, and that is a process in which both ends, at your end and our end, we have to agree to that. So there will be usual checks that we do to any beneficiary. We will also check whether the new owners will adhere to all the terms and conditions under which the project was awarded, whether they have the financial capacity and so on as any other applicant would have. So that would be the procedure. It is possible, but it is subject to an amendment of your contract. Okay, can a project without a consortium or only one beneficiary apply? The answer is yes. We don't ask for artificial consortia. We are trying to avoid that. So please submit your project that makes economic, legal, organizational sense for you. Don't complicate it. According to the Delegated Act, you can produce RFNBO from power from the grid for the auction purposes. Is it possible to leave open the power strategy with no PPAs and state that you will buy it from the spot market?
So yes, this is in principle possible. However, what's important is that your power purchasing strategy is really consistent with the volumes that you put into your bid and your financial information file. So what do I mean with consistent? For example, if you're planning to produce in a market like Norway, which already has more than 90% renewable share, it's credible to claim that all of your volumes will be RFNBO, even if you just buy from the spot market, because the threshold of claiming all of your hydrogen as RFNBO is 90% in the RFNBO Delegated Acts. If you produce in a country with a much lower renewables penetration, it won't be consistent to say you will only buy from the grid, but you're claiming that all of your produced hydrogen will be RFNBO. So the key here is really consistency between the power purchasing strategy and the volumes that you claim as RFNBO in your bid.
Thank you, Johanna. I hope it was very clear. Next question. Can the project have multiple offtake agreements?
So the answer is yes, you can have multiple offtake agreements. You can have even an internal offtake agreement if you have a portion of your project which is integrated and sell the other portion of the RFNBO hydrogen to an external offtaker. Please make sure that you explain how many offtakers you have, the sector they are from, and that you fill adequately the financial information file with, if you have 3 offtakers, then you need to have 3 lines of volume and price so that we clearly see which volume and price are going to which offtaker.
Thank you, Alban. Next question. How will the China criterion be controlled at entry into operation?
I will take this. Okay, so indeed at the entry into operation, we know that the electrolyzer was already manufactured, was delivered, was installed, and so were the stacks of it that are the object of the scrutiny. So at this stage, the manufacturer of this electrolyzer is in a position to issue a self-declaration. So as a part of deliverables at the entry into operation, one of them will be the self-declaration from the manufacturer of the electrolyzer, so not from the project, but from the manufacturer, and this has to be delivered that indeed the stacks delivered to this project are in line with the requirements. It's self-declaration. That means that machinery itself will not be checked or something. We rely on this, but if need be, of course, we have the possibilities of audits.
Yes, and I would like to underline that this is very, very, very strict requirement for this auction. It will be taken very seriously, also by us, as it is sort of sine qua non condition for your bid. So please make sure that you fulfill those requirements throughout the whole life cycle of your project. Next question. When can it be considered that a project has started works before application? Evelina? Yeah? Alban?
So the start of works, so literally it's when you have invested enough so that the project is deemed non-reversible. So if you do some kind of initial feasibility studies or some kind of initial work that's not considered to be start of work. So it's very much when you have engaged sufficient funds or signed the major EPC contract, then at that point we deem that it becomes irreversible and you've started works. Another proxy to that, but again it's more a proxy, is if you've reached your financial close, then you can probably say that you've started work. If you have not reached, then you can probably say that you have not started work. But again, it's more a proxy. Refer yourself to the exact definition of start of work, which is at the back of the call text. Thank you.
Okay. If unclear, have a good look to the definition of start of works that is also in the call text and in particular in the glossary. Is it possible to split one electrolyzer project into multiple bids in the same auction round? Johanna?
For that question, I won't go into a lot of detail now because we have a whole set of Q&As on this specific question. If you go to the already public Q&A, and there's a full section on split capacity of the project from question 39 onwards, and we recommend you have a look there because there's multiple aspects here to consider. The bottom line simple answer is yes, in principle, it's possible under some conditions that define the project boundary in a very clear way, but have a look at the Q&A document.
Just a small addition on this, of course, notwithstanding that the electrolyzer must belong to different projects. So the projects bidding into the same auction have to be different projects located in different facilities and having independent cost benefit and structure.
Yeah, and from operational perspective, I would not advise slicing your project into bits and pieces. You know, the salami slicing is not good approach to manage your projects. I think the auction gives sufficient incentive to submit your project in its integrity. So please have this also in consideration. Any such attitude or organization will only complicate the matters, even if the project would have been selected. Okay, next question. This year a feasibility study is a mandatory attachment. Is it recommended to use the provided template? It's not recommended, it is mandatory. So please use indeed the template and follow the guidance that the template contains. It will, I hope, provide more clarity also to all of you. It's also our try to simplify the documentary evidence required. So please indeed use the template. It is mandatory. It is not recommended.
And please do not modify the templates.
Okay, is it possible to submit a project where several hydrogen plants are located within a radius of 150 kilometers, or is it considered virtual pooling?
No, it needs to be co-located. So the plant needs to be in one location. So if you got 150 kilometers between two plants, we don't look at it as the same project. So literally the site where you have the production of hydrogen needs to be one site.
Okay, next question. How should the 25% of electrolyzer capacity that cannot be sourced in China be calculated? At the stack or at the cell level?
Okay, so here what matters is the capacity of the whole electrolyzer, but it is amount of stacks which confers capacity of the electrolyzer. So if you add the stacks, you come up to certain capacity of this electrolyzer. Imagine that it will be 100 megawatts, for example, megawatt electric, and then 25 megawatts can have stacks which are sourced from China. You know also that their cells can be produced in China, and the surface treatment can be done in China, but the 75% cannot be. So what we care about is the capacity expressed in megawatts. There was a question on Slido whether we care about value, so to take this opportunity, no, value in euros or any other currency doesn't matter, it is about megawatts.
Okay, I hope this was clear. Thank you. Next question. can you change the electrolyzer provider after submitting an application or signing the grant if there are aspects of the provider or the technology that were not identified earlier and do not fit?
Yes, in general, yes. The answer is yes. You can change the electrolyzer provider after the grant is signed, but respecting the volumes that you promise in your application and the same technology.
And still adhering to China rule, to put it like this, you have to also obviously fulfill all the conditions based on which your project was selected. So please have this in mind. And in the context, you have also some checkpoints during monitoring where we'll be checking whether there are any changes in the offtake, any changes in the project. So have this in mind that you would need to report on that. Next question. How can the initiation of the approval process be demonstrated? Is a confirmation of initial discussion sufficient? I mean, you refer to permitting procedure? Yeah, colleagues?
Yeah, yes, we assume that it's for the permits. It depends on, by member state, they have different procedures, but you need to prove on the sufficient evidence that you have started the process. So, for instance, submitting the first application forms or support letters with the confirmation by the granting authorities proving that you have initiated the permitting process already.
Okay, maybe just to add, what is the point of this? The point is on your proof that you are indeed in position to reach financial close within 2.5 years and entry into operation within 5 years. So that's why we ask you to prove that in terms of also permitting procedures, because as you know, financial close also includes all the permits granted for your project. Okay, I hope this was clear. Next question. If the project does not reach entry into operation because of, for example, the pipeline is not ready, so external factors that can't be influenced, is the grant still terminated? The answer is yes. Unfortunately, this is really a hard rule that we'll need to follow. Next question. Could you please clarify under cybersecurity requirements which ISO standards are included? Also, what all data needs to be captured? Thank you.
Okay, there are two elements here under this cybersecurity requirements. So, per se, we don't refer in the call text to any ISO standard on cybersecurity. We ask for a cybersecurity plan. Now, if you find it useful, if you would already have in the future a given ISO standard, and we understand that there is indeed a couple in this domain, of course, be welcome and refer to those standards for the installation, but you will not find in the call text any enumeration of such standards. So, yeah, voluntary if you like. And then there is a question on the data, so that's also part of the cybersecurity plan that we require intention to have at the bidding, and then we will require as mandatory deliverable at the entry into operation. So this data, you heard us explaining earlier, yes, all data is covered. Operational data, personal data, metadata, all is covered. And then you know that it has to be stored in the EEA.
Yes, thank you, Evelina. And I think that also stems from, let's say, overall security and data management framework that we have. So I hope the answer was clear to you. I'm looking at the colleagues and they signal there are no more questions put on Slido. If that is the case, and I still give you a minute to consider whether you may have any question that we need to answer. And if not, then in the meantime, let us, first of all, thank you all for being with us today. We are really honored to have such a large crowd of interested applicants with us today. And thank you for your time and efforts also that is yet to come in working on your applications. Let me thank also the colleagues who are behind this event, the communication team, the colleagues from DG Klima, from CINEA, for all your hard work to make this event possible for you. We would really welcome if you could get back to us here. You will see go to Slido, please, and there should be a survey with a couple of questions on the quality of the event. We are really interested to hear from you so that we can improve our events going forward. So please provide your feedback to us. Thank you so much. And with this, I would close our info day for 24 RFNBO hydrogen auction call under the Innovation Fund. I hope we have given you sufficient framework for thinking, first of all, and then getting into it and preparing your proposal. I admit it was a dense morning with a lot of information. I repeat, all the presentations will be published later today at our website, so you will have access to the recording, to the slides. Please have a second look, third look, fourth look, if need be. A Q&A document is already published on the Funding and Tenders portal, so please have a good look there. There is a host of important questions that we have tried already to answer that will help you to navigate through the maze. There are tutorials put at your disposal, both for putting the application in the system, for filling in the financial information file. I trust it's well done, so please go through those tutorials. They will help you to navigate and understand better how to move on. If you have any residual question that is project specific, do not hesitate to use our help desk, which is also public. It's open, and the team behind this call will get back to you as soon as we can. Is there anything else I should say? This is a call to all experts out there who would be interested to join us for the next edition of the lump sum calls that will be presented next week. As you know, those calls are assessed with the help of external independent experts. So if you know people around you who have a strong expertise, whether in engineering, financial matters, project finance, greenhouse gas emissions calculations, or in helping in summarizing and drafting concise reports, please apply. The call is open throughout the year. We are trying to extend the database of experts, and of course our objective is to have the best of the best people assessing our proposals. So please pass the word around your networks, and we would be happy to hear from you. And I think that would be it. If there are no more points from colleagues to say, no? So thank you so much for being with us. We are really honored to be here today with you. And let me wish you all the best for the forthcoming festive season and a very busy January and February before we close the call. And I'm really looking forward for many very high quality proposals. I hope we helped you today to get there. Have a nice day. Bon appétit. Goodbye.